May 24th, 2022. Early in the morning, Elle, one of the artists for the upcoming Fazbear Fanverse initiative titled Pop Goes Evergreen, was getting ready to start their day when they saw a message from Kane Carter, the director of the project. Evergreen has had leaks. Elle's heart dropped in their chest. The rest of the day would be filled with chats and video calls as the team frantically scrambled to put together what had happened. A few hours ago, an anonymous Twitter account dropped a bomb on the FNAF community, going into details about how a group that included notable fan game developers were operating a secret chat for about a year and a half. According to this tweet, the intention behind this chat was to collect content from upcoming Fanverse projects, including several that are officially licensed under the Fazbear Fanverse, such as Pop Goes Evergreen, with the intent to eventually leak it all to the public. The three developers accused of participating were Ultraknight of Chomper's fame, Mechless, the developer of Project Readjusted, and Junior's developer Ramanov, who I actually recently interviewed for a video. According to the poster, who has chosen to remain anonymous, their own fan game project, as well as those belonging to several of their friends, had been compromised by this group as well. In the wake of this, Kane Carter made his own statement with more details and better evidence. According to Kane, in late May, the Pop Goes Evergreen team was given an anonymous tip regarding the aforementioned group chat referred to as The Pair. The Pair was apparently used to host and discuss leaks of fan games, including Kane's own highly anticipated project. Many FNAF fan game developers are close friends, and they'll often share behind-the-scenes progress or bounce ideas off each other, and the implication here is that Ultraknight, Ramanov, and Mechless were using their connections within the fan game community to get their hands on non-public materials. Kane also alleges that doxing occurred in this chat, including Facebook profiles, photos, identifying information, all that bad stuff. There were even allegations that Scott Cawthon's private wedding video, as well as many of his personal photos, were included in the group chat. Kane provides compelling evidence that the pair were planning to mass release their ill-gotten content, that they were keeping it in their pockets as leverage over other fan game projects. Kane and the Pop Goes team worked to identify the source of the leaks for their project, and eventually zeroed in on a team member who was friends with Ultraknight, who comes off as the ringleader of the pair. A lot of fan game developers are friends, and they often privately share bits and pieces of their projects and bounce ideas off one another. With Ultraknight being a pretty major figure in the FNAF fan game scene, it's totally plausible that this Pop Goes team member was sharing the stuff innocently. Kane confirms this, asserting their belief that this person had no idea that Ultraknight was adding these leaks to a dossier of blackmail. Kane and his crew then discovered that a close friend of the Pop Goes Evergreen team was an active member of the pair. They confronted this person who spilled the beans. According to Kane, this is how they were made aware of the doxing allegations, as well as the staggering amount of blackmail that Ultraknight and his co-conspirators had amassed. This was a delicate situation. The Pop Goes team had a proverbial knife to their throats. If they came out publicly and made everyone aware of the situation with the pair, there was a very real chance that Ultraknight and co would retaliate. People are most dangerous when they have nothing to lose, so in the interest of protecting their project, the Pop Goes team kept quiet. As Kane says in his statement, if their reputation were to be ruined by this going public, what would they have to lose? There was a very real chance of them going nuclear and causing as big a mess as possible as they went down with the ship. Kane and his team didn't sit by idly though. Ultraknight, Ramanov, and Mechless were banned from many communities, including Reddit Discord, Fiznom server, and more. They wanted to protect the community from them as best as they could without escalating the situation any further. The screenshots Kane provided are quite damning. We see Ultraknight asserting that he has a private one-member Discord server explicitly for storing leaked fan game content that he'd acquired. Specifically, Ultraknight says it contains the super important stuff. It's anyone's guess what Ultraknight deemed most important, but I surmise this was especially potent blackmail related to especially prominent projects like Pop Goes. Ramanov indicates that they too have a server for these same purposes. Ultraknight goes on to clarify that none of the pair's content was stored on that server. This is so funny to me. There's no honor among thieves. Take it from me. There's zero doubt in my mind that Ultraknight was holding onto all of Ramanov's leaks, who was also probably holding onto all of Ultraknight's. I think they're all full of shit here. It's kind of bizarre to look into this as an outsider. We can also see that this group clearly had something out for Kane Carter specifically. They frequently reference exposing Kane, with Ultraknight explaining that should it come to it, they would do so whilst leaving the community. I'd do the biggest middle finger. Another screenshot shows Junior's developer Ramanov asking whether they have any other games that need to be assassinated. Ultraknight replies saying, Pop Goes Nevergreen. Ugh, really, dude? Pop Goes Nevergreen is the one that needs to go down the most. We will talk about objectives in the call. This is so... Who the hell do these people think they are, the mafia or something? Throughout this video, I encourage everyone to step back and remind themselves that all of this was over Five Nights at Freddy's fan games. We see Ramanov asking if it's possible for one of them to become really close friends with Emil Mako in hopes of getting Five Nights at Candy's 4 leaks. Everything we see looks like a group dedicated to social engineering. For those of you who are unaware, social engineering is the psychological manipulation of people into divulging confidential information. It's usually associated with scams and identity theft. In this case, Ultranite, Ramanov, and Meklis aren't out there stealing credit card numbers, as far as we're aware. It looks like they used their reputations, their positions in the community, and the strength and popularity of some of their fangame projects to worm their way into other circles of fangame developers for the sole purpose of collecting leaks. We can see this message from March 9th of 2021, where Ultranite literally says, "Dude, we have access to 4 PopGo's team members. Why don't we take advantage of that?" When Kane and their team learned about this, they were of course devastated. The aforementioned PopGo's artist L, who goes by the username Stupid Butterfly, is actually a friend of mine, and they explained to me that they were really strongly impacted by this. I had nightmares about confronting Ultranite over it, panic attacks over seeing how they talked about my team members, headaches, stomach aches. Looking at these screenshots, it looks to me like Ultranite just hates Kane Carter in particular. There's a clear pattern of Ultranite fixating on and trying to collect PopGo's leaks and ruining Kane specifically. Ultranite's own laughably ridiculous apology confirms as much, that there was some sort of beef between the two of them. I spoke to Kane and I asked him what the history was here. It turns out that Kane's artist L had worked pretty closely with Ultranite. They were actually on the Chompers team for a little while. However, they were also a committed member of the PopGo's Evergreen team, and PopGo's work was to take priority over Chompers. I took the Chompers work because I thought I could handle it, but I was still learning my limits and realized that I couldn't keep up. I foolishly underestimated the workload. As I mentioned before, I know L. They're a friend of mine, and they're a really friendly, non-confrontational type of person. I totally understand them being really anxious in this situation and needing help navigating it. Kane explained to me that he had his own concerns that L was getting overwhelmed, and so he reached out to Ultranite and asked if they would be open to replacing L with a new artist so that L could focus on their obligations to PopGo's. Make no mistake though, L was not able to keep this up and explained to me that they likely would have needed to step down soon anyway. Additionally, as is extremely common among fangame developers, Kane gave Ultranite some suggestions for ways Chompers could be made more visually distinct from PopGo's. According to Kane, Ultranite was really polite and friendly during their conversation, only to allegedly turn around and be furious towards Kane in private, that he was completely out of line to have done this. I don't know if this was the single event that caused Ultranite to act so spitefully towards Kane. They knew each other for a long time, and as young FNAF fans of all things, I'm sure there's plenty of history between the two. However, nothing that went on could possibly justify the things that the pair allegedly did. This was just what came to Kane's mind when I asked him if he had any idea why Ultranite hated him so much. PopGo's wasn't the only game impacted though. A huge amount of fan games were compromised and added to the dossier. Essentially, if you shared private details of your fan game to Ultranite, Ramanov, Meklis, or anyone else involved, or, as was the case with Kane Carter, you share private details with someone who then goes on to share it with one of those people, it's incredibly likely that your assets are included within this leak. It's a really crappy position to be in, and I really feel for all the fangame developers. Many of them are struggling with the fact that years of their work could be released to the public at any minute in an unfinished state, and that's awful. Worse though is how betrayed people surely must feel. Ultranite and other members of the pair were respected community members, and many considered them close friends. To find out that someone who acted nice to you and pretended to be your friend was actually stealing your content, weaponizing information, and trying to destroy people? That's harrowing. It's awful, and I'm sorry to everyone who's going through that right now. As I said before, the PopGo's artist L is a friend of mine, and they're still really struggling with this. It's not unreasonable for people to be less trusting after being burned so badly like this. It takes time to get over this. It hurts to think that our entire community has been damaged by the cruel and callous actions of a select few individuals. In the wake of this scandal, we got statements from basically everyone to varying degrees of detail and credibility. Ramanov indicated that he wouldn't be commenting about it, but that he'll be taking his leave after Junior's launches in under a week. Meklis released the most combative statement, implying that this was sort of just a group chat meant for them to talk about games, but that over time they started getting leaks and it got out of hand. This would be plausible, I guess, but Meklis goes on to suggest that nobody ever intended to leak the ill-gotten fangame content, quote, regardless of any screenshots. Ultranite deleted his Twitter and released the most comprehensive statement of all, which makes sense. He definitely comes off as the ringleader here. He explains how he came to be in possession of leaked stuff, and he did apologize. Ultranite goes on to explain that he had been extremely frustrated with a fanverse developer, who I assume is Kane Carter, and out of anger, he said that he would make the leaked information public if things went downhill. Meklis' statement appears to reference the same event, explaining that people in on the group chat were fired up over a private matter, which he declines to elaborate on. However, both Ultranite and Meklis insist that they never actually intended to leak any of the information. The thing is though, that's bullshit. I'm sorry, that's bullshit, and everyone knows it. There are copious screenshots of these developers demonstrating this pattern of behavior over a substantially long period of time. In February of last last year, we see Ramanov and Ultranite discussing assassinating games and mentioning Popgoes specifically. A month later, we see Ramanov surmising that if one of them became close enough with Emil Mako, they might be able to acquire Candy's leaks. Ultranite gleefully discusses a member of the Popgoes team leaking information to him. A month later, Ultranite appears to say that if Kane pisses him off enough, he's going to leak his project in retribution. We see he has a Discord server dedicated to his own leaks. Even 4 months later, we see this conversation. If Kane single-handedly gets you, you have to expose him. If that happens, I'd just do it while leaving the community. I'd do the biggest middle finger. Ultranite and Meklis' statements just don't hold up to the weight of the evidence they're trying to dispute. They're trying to say this wasn't a deliberate thing, that they just ended up with all this leaked content on their server, not because they were deliberately collecting it to weaponize it, but because they were just casually discussing other interesting fangame projects. This almost sounds believable. Again, it's well known that there are cliques of fangame devs who collaborate frequently and bounce ideas off each other. However, the screenshots show a pattern of deliberate behavior that went on for months, if not longer. We see them talking about targeting games for assassination, literally trying to destroy months of people's hard work. We see them making social engineering plans, suggesting one of them become close to Emil for the sole purpose of acquiring leaks. They discuss other community members they see as useful due to their propensity for sharing leaks. With such compelling evidence, it's virtually impossible to give any of them the benefit of the doubt. If someone had just stumbled across a server with this stuff, but there wasn't any evidence that it had been deliberately amassed, if there wasn't any evidence that they were deliberately cozying up to other devs for the sole purpose of stealing their games, if there wasn't so much evidence of them clearly intending to weaponize this content against other creators, then maybe I would be willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. However, in light of this evidence, their statements just don't hold up to scrutiny. If anything, Ramanov's is the best because he didn't even try to defend his actions or justify himself. You can't just say we never intended to leak anything regardless of any screenshots that suggest otherwise. What should we believe? The stuff that you said repeatedly over months in private, or the stuff that you're saying now publicly after you've been caught and outed and humiliated? Come on. Ultranite's statement has this paragraph about how he feels so bad for betraying his best friend, the one who sent him most of the Popgoes evergreen content. He tries to suggest that he only threatened to leak the information during moments of anger, but the private messages sing a completely different tune. Ultranite doesn't come off that angry here. We've all said and done things that we regret out of anger, but that's not what this looks like at all. FNAF Plus developer Fiznam told me that he deliberately told members of the pair fake information about FNAF Plus to see if it would leak. Sure enough, Fiznam received confirmation from a friend that Ultranite had since started bragging that they had received FNAF Plus leaks. And that wasn't that long ago, and it's just another piece of evidence that suggests members of the pair aren't really that sorry about what they did, just sorry that they got caught. If this had ended years ago or something, it might be more plausible, but we have the timestamps and that's just not the case. However, there's another side to this story. It turns out that Ultranite's fangame project, Chompers, was actually well into the process of being admitted into Scott Cawthon's Fazbear Fanverse initiative. After this news dropped, indie developer and Chompers team member Uro, best known for their VR remakes of classic FNAF games, announced that Chompers was cancelled and released a bunch of materials related to the project, including a playable demo that you can check out on GameJolt right now. This was really cool of Uro and the rest of the Chompers team, and it really opened my eyes to a whole second layer of this. Obviously, what Kane and his team and all the other impacted fangame devs went through is awful, and those are the really obvious victims here. However, Ultranite was a popular figure in the community and had a team of people working under him. That game is now cancelled and all of those people's work is gone. I was able to get in touch with Uro and talk to them about their experience working on Chompers with Ultranite. In a fortunate turn of events, the Chompers team never actually got to the point where they signed NDAs. The project was cancelled while that process was going on. I want everything to be clear up front. While it's not my obligation to adhere to other people's NDAs, and nobody can compel another person to break their NDA, Uro has assured me that they aren't in violation of any contracts. The following is Uro's first-hand account of events they actually participated in, and they haven't done anything wrong by speaking to me. Also along these lines, they wanted to make it very clear that they don't have any issues with Scott aside from some communication problems, which continue to come up as one of Scott's weak points. That's okay. It's reasonable that fan projects aren't Scott's priority. That they disagreed with past assertions that the Fanverse was a merch machine or anything like that. Uro joined the Chompers team after they'd already initiated communications with Scott and the Fanverse. They had been in negotiations with Scott and tentatively agreed to receive a budget of $16,000 in order to make their game. According to Uro, U-Row, the plan was for the team to be granted the FNAF license and funding, but that the resulting game would be released for free. This sounds like a cool arrangement, and it's really generous of Scott to hand over a pretty substantial amount of money to these young, aspiring developers, demand nothing in return, and again, according to U-Row, release the game for free. There's a common saying in business though, nothing is done until it's done. One can only breathe easy when the contract is signed and the money hits your account. The Chompers team had gotten to the point of signing formal NDAs so that they could move into the final stages of negotiations. Chompers was going to be announced as an upcoming fanverse entry. When Kane Carter learned of the pair's deception, he reached out to Scott Cawthon to let him know. Some people tried to criticize Kane for doing this for some reason I don't really understand. Everything Kane did here sounds perfectly reasonable to me. Considering he knew that Ultra Knight's game was well on its way to becoming an official fanverse entry, it's perfectly reasonable that Kane would want to call Scott, his partner in a sense, and let him know what was going on. Kane even implied that he was contractually obligated to reach out to Scott, though the exact details of this agreement is between Scott and Kane, and it's none of our business really. About 2 weeks ago, on May 31st of this year, the Chompers team was informed that Scott had elected not to admit their game into the fanverse. This was obviously crushing for the team, who were very optimistic that things had been going well. The next day, Ultra Knight explained to the team that their game had been rejected for funding allocation reasons or something. This doesn't really make any sense. Scott runs the fanverse. If he wants to fund a game, he'll fund it. If Chompers was ultimately rejected from the fanverse, it was because Scott decided to reject it. The notion that Scott really wanted Chompers to be included, but that he just couldn't make it work because of some administrative procedural thing, it's kinda hard to believe. It sounds like a nice thing you say to someone when you reject them. Nah, I'm fairly certain that upon learning about the pair from Kane Carter, Scott rightfully lost any and all confidence in Ultra Knight and pulled the plug on his whole project. According to U-Row, after being rejected from the fanverse, Ultra Knight suggested that the team, which like most Fangames is made up of volunteers, should take a break. A few days later, U-Row noticed that many members had left the Discord. In the wake of the leaks, the team started to dissolve, with some members being more aware of the allegations against Ultra Knight than others. People knew that there had been some drama, but not everyone knew the extent or the severity of it. As mentioned before, in the wake of the recent statements, U-Row began compiling materials related to the project for public release, similar to what the Aftonbuilt team did. The actions of Ultra Knight, Meklis, Ramanov, and everyone else in the pair were pretty reprehensible. I can't even begin to speculate on why these developers did it. Obviously, Kane Carter and the Popgoes team are going through a lot in regards to this. I'm sure the other fanverse devs are too. Beyond that, a ton of smaller, less well-known fangame developers were also impacted the same way Kane was, and obviously everyone should sympathize with them. They shouldn't have had to go through this. With so many major figures involved in this controversy, it can be easy to forget that an entire team of primarily innocent people had their fanverse hopes and their entire game cancelled over this. Ultra Knight may have been the face of Chompers, but there were a lot of people working behind the scenes to make that project a reality. Now, because of Ultra Knight's selfish and childish decisions, they had to abandon everything that they've worked so hard on. Every FNAF fangame developer dreams of an opportunity to become part of the fanverse. Ultra Knight dashed both his own dreams as well as the dreams of his team, and that sucks. Team members who trusted him and devoted hours of their free time and effort to him. It comes off like Ultra Knight was so focused on destroying Kane, he completely failed to recognize that this could jeopardize his entire reputation in this community, as well as his own project and the people who rely on him. Either that, or Ultra Knight did know and he just didn't care. Messages like this one suggest that Ultra Knight would happily just throw everyone to the wolves and try to cause as much havoc as possible in his departure. I can't fathom knowingly compromising a team of people who look up to and rely on you, but maybe Ultra Knight just doesn't care. Considering his statements since the controversy broke have been paper thin at best, we'll probably never know. When people show you who they really are, believe them. Talk is cheap, and actions speak louder than words. Ultra Knight and Meklis' statements suggest that this wasn't done deliberately, that while there were leaks on the server, they weren't collecting them. They claim that they weren't seeking this information out, yet there are copious screenshots demonstrating that they were social engineering and deliberately trying to acquire as many leaks as possible. This behavior persisted for months, yet Ultra Knight claims he said it in moments of anger and frustration. All of these things I've felt guilt over for a while, and especially the last 10 days. You know what happened 10 days prior to this? Ultra Knight's project was rejected from the fanverse. Ultra Knight did this for months, yet expects us to believe that upon finally experiencing consequences for their actions, they've suddenly changed and seen the light? Come on, this suggests to me that Ultra Knight never recognized the pain and damage that this caused across the community. Only when Ultra Knight experienced consequences themselves and lost their fanverse opportunity did they suddenly claim to start feeling guilt. The only solace I take in this situation is that there were consequences, big ones. I'm convinced the pair is the reason that Ultra Knight lost his fanverse pitch, as well as his position as a reputable figure in the community. Ramanov's game Juniors is set to release in under a week, and I was told by a very reliable source that Ramanov was was actively in negotiations to produce a follow-up for the fanverse. I'm incredibly skeptical that that's going to happen now. I highly doubt Scott is going to give Ramanov the benefit of the doubt after this. I understand a lot of you are mad. I'm mad. People I respect, people I consider friends, lots of people were hurt by this. I really doubt the pair considered that these actions would affect far more than just Kane. Elle considered Ultranite a friend. They nearly worked themselves to exhaustion trying to deliver for both Popgoes and Chompers. Elle is a really nice, non-confrontational, sort of anxious person, and it really does upset me that these actions cause so much stress and grief for my friend who had nothing to do with any of this. Most of the victims are in the same boat. Most of them are probably small fangame devs you haven't heard of yet, team members who have dedicated tremendous amount of time and work towards their projects. The pair's actions impacted far more than just the people they were targeting, and in Ultranite's case, they sabotaged his own game's prospects. I hope it's done. Ultranite is gone. His game is cancelled. Ramanov's alleged fanverse pitch is likely dead in the water. Going forward, fangame developers are going to be a lot more careful about who they share their progress with, and that sucks, because a lot of really great things can happen as a result of more open communication and collaboration between developers. There will be some longer-lasting impacts of this scandal. You may be a huge fan of Kane's or Scott's, or just angry that beloved community members would do such a thing. That's totally reasonable. I'm angry too. However, please don't go bothering any of the people involved in this story. The fact that this story broke is punishment enough. The alleged perpetrators have already experienced pretty substantial consequences, and their reputations are pretty heavily damaged now. Just ignore them. And please, if content does look like a leak and we start seeing assets and even full playable builds of games hit the internet, don't play it. You wouldn't want to play some broken in-dev version of a game that was never intended for release anyway. Thanks for watching.